Hey Nation, I got an imposter in the room. You might want to stick around. Tara Halliday joining me live in the lab with Keith Billis.
Hi, I'm Keith Billis, and this is Live in the Lab.
All right. A little bit of weirdness in front of the camera there for anybody who's watching. So I'm like, hey, where's the button? Where's the button? I can't get it going.
How did you go viral on TikTok? You were on America's Got Talent. How much did you get paid to be on AGT? Oh, you didn't get paid.
Keith and Steve here in Live in the Lab.
You're a great interviewer. I love it.
48 miles, 48 hours. And not just once. You ain't seen nothing yet. I hit 50 last time, and I'm like, yeah, things are a little different than they were 10 years ago. So trust me, things are to keep. You have no time for the BS that much of society seems to put on the table. Why is that? Like, what you're talking about is real right now. There's just no bullshit here, but it's just real. We brought you in with some Marley. I said, Joseph, let's talk music for a second. You said, well, Keith, oldies, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I've never talked to a sir before. Why are you a sir? In many ways, we're the same story. I came from nothing. You came from nothing. I think the old saying goes that if you want a trophy, you climb Everest. If you want respect, you climb K2. I've built an AI myself, and it's pretty fascinating when you can have a conversation with yourself with your own knowledge. Have you done that before? Why are we rushing to make these tools if they're all going to do is hurt humanity? Does the world need an Oppenheimer moment with AI?
What a fun show.
Going on, Nation? Keith Billis here with the Impostor. Tara Halliday coming up. Hey, I got to get to the hook apparently. Quick. You guys got to tune in. Don't go away. What did he just say? Yeah, I said that. Tara Halliday coming up. We're going to talk imposter syndrome. You know, I've struggled with that. I have absolutely struggled. I'm struggling with the button right now, too. I like to enunciate this. Y'all know what I'm saying. I used to say button. And then Lauren gets into my life. She's like, no, it's actually button. Do you guys say button or button? Is it button or I don't know. I'm sure Tara, who joins us from not London, but from Wales. Wales. Lots of rain there in Wales today, she tells me. Anyway, she's coming up here in a few moments. We're going to talk imposter syndrome. Do you struggle with it like I have? Because I sure as hell struggle with it. It wasn't until I got in front of the camera here instead of in front of the microphone and recognized that, holy shit, man. We are going to go build the world's biggest talk show on LinkedIn and YouTube because we recognize that we get awesome guests here in the show. We have great conversations and people are digging it. So I'm like, hey, I'll just be the conduit of conversation. Welcome people in like Tara and celebrate them. Welcome people like Dalton Danks this morning on the morning show and celebrate them. But before we bring in Tara and talk about your imposter syndrome, my imposter syndrome, everybody's imposter syndrome, you know, sometimes I wonder, is that just like we all just say, we all got imposter syndrome. Do we? I'm going to ask Tara that question. Like, is it really a thing or is it a thing in our head? Makes me curious because it seems like we all go through a path of, I just have imposter syndrome. What the hell does it mean? Does it mean you question yourself? Does it mean you question your abilities? Does it mean that you don't know if you're good at something? Does it mean that you question whether you're even invited? Does it make you question whether you belong? Listen, I have been through that journey in my life. You want to talk about a pause? I'll give you a pause to hang on. I bet you're listening to this, you're thinking, oh yeah, Uncle Keith, I've been there too. And if you're one of my awesome listeners on the journey through life right now, and you haven't experienced imposter syndrome yet, it's coming. It's coming. So I welcome you to continue listening with myself and Tara, because I suspect she talks to people all the time about it. And she probably is kind of an expert in it. And I suspect she's going to teach us a little bit about it. But before we go there, I wasn't going to say anything. Nope. Just wasn't going to say anything. I just was going to keep it in my mouth. I just thought that I would just tuck it aside. Just thought I'd just put it over, just lock it up in the key and put it aside. But I just can't. I can't. You're thinking, what is he talking about? What are you talking about, Keith? What's the hook? I'll tell you what the hook is. Oh, man. You all know how I love my local hockey team. I love my Winnipeg Jets. I love them. I've invested a lot of money in trying to win the Stanley Cup. And a season ticket holder forever. But why? Just why? 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 Why do you have to cause so much friction in my life? I just want to give you my money. I just want to win the Stanley Cup. That's all that I want to do. Sorry that I'm yelling. I'm lost with my cameras. I just want to win the cup. I really do. That's all I want to do. Just want to win the cup. But don't make it so hard to be a customer. Don't make it so hard for me to be a happy customer. Oh, I just want to feel good when I spend my money. I just want to come to you and I want to say, oh, here's my money. I really feel good about giving it to you. But instead, you make me feel really shitty. I'm sorry. I just said it. Sorry, Tara. It's your show. Listen, I'm here to entertain and I'm here to inform. And I'm here to bare my soul to all of you because I love my Winnipeg Jets. And I just want to feel good when I give my money to something. And if you're a business owner, I got a little secret for you. I don't know much. Oh, I don't know much at all, actually. I just like to talk. I like to have good. Just a little bit. I'm a Canadian. I don't brag. But I'll just offer you this. If you're a business owner or you're an entrepreneur, I think Tara will agree with me. Make your wasn't going to swear. Nope. That was for the morning show. Mornings in the Lab with Keith and Nicole, Monday to Friday. Make your customers feel great. Just obsess over them. Obsess. If you serve them fries, cut the extra potato. Make the plate of fries look bigger. Give them more value. Take the extra minute. Just make them feel exceptionally awesome. Oh, and you know what will happen? They're probably going to like you. Maybe the same way that, I'm just going to go ahead and say this too. Maybe the same way that Tara felt when she got a personal video from me saying, hey, Tara, I want to introduce myself and welcome you to the lab. I took a minute to cut the extra potato. That minute turned that plate of fries into a big plate of fries. Tara's like, hey, there's lots of value on the plate. I like this plate of fries. Yeah, I took a minute. I gave it to Tara. Tara's like, I might give 4 minutes to Uncle Keith. She might tell her partner, her husband, or her family and say, hey, go give 4 minutes to Keith. My 1 minute turned into 8 minutes back into me. Boom. Just make your customers happy. It's not rocket science. Oh. Tara, thanks for being patient with me. I appreciate that. All right. I'm done. Yep, just done. I'm going to invite Tara into the lab because she's been awesomely, patiently waiting for me in the green room of the Business Athlete Performance Lab. Tara Halliday, thank you for joining me from Wales today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me, Keith.
How are you? I got to turn the music off. I appreciate you hanging tight while I had to get that off my chest. I just get this music off here.
I'm glad you did, because now you're coming in nice and calm and it's gone. You don't have to have it going around in your head, distracting you. No, it needed to be done. Go ahead.
As I was ranting, viewers were going up, Tara. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to lean into this one because people are like, oh, I don't know what he's saying, but I think I might drink what he's saying. And I'm getting the old hearts too. But I'm like, yeah, anyway. So you're joining us from Wales. You said it's raining there. But you also said you had some sun today. How sunny is it ever in Wales, England?
It gets pretty sunny, actually. It's not too bad. It has a reputation for rain, but there's a lot more sun than you might think. I mean, it's just unfortunate you've caught us in an unfortunate period of rain right now.
That's it. So I like to have fun with my guests. I say to my family and all my friends, anybody comes to the lab's a friend of mine, but I show love through tease. I show love through teasing people and tossing them under the bus and just wrapping them with love and gestures. And you heard me, maybe flipping some cliches during the monologue about just the idea of imposter syndrome and what is it and is it real and all that. So I'm really eager to have that chat with you today and just talk about imposter syndrome. I know I have battled it myself, if that's what we want to call that, and I'm eager to have that conversation with you. But Tara, talk a little bit about why the audience who's paying attention right now, after they listen to my rant for a little while, they're going, Tara Halliday, the imposter expert, imposter syndrome. What's take a moment to introduce yourself for me.
Yeah, so I think the reason that people would listen is because people start to recognize imposter syndrome in themselves, right? Although it's been known about, identified for well over 40 years, it really only became popular in the media, in the press, and those kind of things since 2015, so not even 10 years. And as more and more people are talking about it for the first time, people are starting to say, oh yeah, I do that. Oh, that's me. And suddenly they've got something which they thought was a problem with themselves. They thought that which is the imposter syndrome, is feeling not quite good enough. When you feel that your secret feeling of it being a fraud, when you're not a fraud, when you're actually being very successful, and the self-doubt and that sense of not belonging that comes with it. So yeah, I think it's that recognition. I get that a lot. Oh yeah, and you even said yourself, oh, I think that might be me.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I can completely relate to that. So Tara, where does your expertise come from and through? Let's help the audience understand why. So who's Tara? Like, what is she? Why is she the imposter syndrome expert? What has Tara studied? What has Tara written? Who's Tara from Wales? Why should I keep listening to her expertise on imposter syndrome? Because somebody right now is going, yeah, I hear what she's saying. I'm drinking her Kool-Aid, but who's Tara?
Well, who is now? If you go into the who is Tara, you've suddenly jumped into this huge, profound question: that who am I?
Yes.
Right? And what you don't realize, Keith, if you've actually fast forwarded right to the very heart of what imposter syndrome is, that we tend to define ourselves and who we are by what we do. Yeah. So how many of your guests have you said, who is, and given their name, and they've told you what they've done?
We all do. My whole identity before this whole thing came out was what I did yesterday.
Exactly. And so what that is the real problem of imposter syndrome, is that belief that our worth, because that's really what it is, our worth, are we good enough? Our worth depends on what we do, because we merge together who we are and what we do. When the reality is that our worth is exactly the same as when we were born. Baby's born, it's an absolute miracle. Doesn't have to do anything to get cared for or loved or admired, right? It just is. That quality, that worth, never goes away throughout your whole life. But we have this false belief that we are what we do. And therefore, if we do something that we judge to be not quite good enough, then we feel that we are not quite good enough. And that's the problem. So we've got very deep, very fast.
Business Athlete Nation knows this is where I love to go. So let's keep going.
Yeah,
Tara, then let me re-ask you a different question.
Okay.
How should you be oh no, hold on. Oh, the horse. Talked about it this morning on the morning show. I like to plug my morning show. Never talk about shitting on yourself or myself, because you don't want to shit on yourself because it stinks. So what would be a better way for me to ask you, who is Tara, and what would be a better way for you to introduce yourself?
Yes.
Instead of introducing yourself in a way that we typically would, related to our identity or our imposter.
Yes, very, very, very good. And actually, I was playing with you a bit there, because
that's good.
Such a good word. Okay, so where the question is, who am I to speak about imposter syndrome? Really?
Yeah.
What do I know about it? Yes. So I've been a holistic therapist and coach for 24 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And in my work as a therapist, I would see people, and most of them would, get happier and go away. Some of them kept coming back. And for me, that's a problem, because I wasn't supposed to be a crutch for them. I was supposed to be a catalyst for them to change and blossom and grow and fly away, right? And so I started looking into why people, this subset of people, why they got stuck. And what it came down to was their beliefs. Well, I found some very profound coaching work around beliefs and about worth. And what I described as our worth depends on what we do. That's conditional worth. It's got conditions to it. And we can change that to unconditional worth. And that was the work that I did as a coach, which was brilliant. And so I was enjoying that, working with clients, doing these, really deep, profound transformations. And one of my clients said, is this imposter syndrome? And I thought, and this was 2016. And I thought, well, I hadn't heard of that. It's really only just started to be talked about. Let me research it. And I'm a bit of a researcher. I do like to research. So I jumped into all of the academic research, what defines it, what are the symptoms, who gets it, when, why, how, all of that. And I had this light bulb moment, this realization that the symptoms of imposter syndrome are the same as the symptoms of conditional worth that I'd been trained as in a coach, as a coach. So it was because I'd had that training, I could see it. It's like, oh wow, this is phenomenal. So I decided there and then that I was going to start working with people with imposter syndrome. So I did that. I put together all of my research. In 2018, I wrote the book, The Coach's Unmasking, which is the coach's guide to imposter syndrome, to help people with imposter syndrome. And just last year, I've written my second book, Outsmart Imposter Syndrome, which is based on my one-to-one program that I've since developed that gets rid of imposter syndrome for good. So,
you said a few things that I want to, unpack. I never really thought about the business of what you do through the way you presented it to me, which was, I actually want my customers to churn. Essentially what you're saying. I want my customers to get good and leave again. And I'm like, you're spending your entire life perpetually trying to convince somebody to drink your Kool-Aid so you can make them like it and then leave you. Oh my goodness. What a messed up business that actually is when I think about it.
Well, see, if I start, maybe, but it's a business model. But for me, that's impact.
It 100%.
Every person who comes to me is a life transformed, is a life changed. And for me, that's just amazing. And one of the reasons I wrote my books is so that they don't have to just come to me. They can read my books. They can go and see another coach. They can get help. So, there's the ripple effect of that impact is really what I'm passionate about. So I don't mind the churn.
In a world of social proof, the work you do really, the impact you have for people, it says enough, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's huge. What's interesting about imposter syndrome is that there was a paper done in 2020 which decided to look at the last 40 years of imposter syndrome research, who gets it, where, when and where, this big meta study. And one of the things that they say in the paper, this is academic research now, they said that in all those 40 years, there were no validated solutions to imposter syndrome. Like nobody had published a solution, a cure, if you like, to imposter syndrome. Now, they also said that, but if you look in the media, in the social media, in the press and the magazines, there's loads and loads of advice about what to do about imposter syndrome, but it's not backed up by any research. And I'm a bit of a science geek, and so I like the neuroscience. I like the proof. And so what I did is I went back through my work with imposter syndrome with clients, and I measured and I quantified exactly that transformation, and it's a consistent transformation. So I'm currently in the process of writing one of these academic papers with a solution to imposter syndrome. So I'm very excited about that.
This is spectacular. I want to hang on this. I got to pause because my brain's. I know why show hosts have producers, because they got people saying, okay, here's the next question. Because I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm processing. I'm listening intently. I have these questions I want to ask, but then I lose track of it. I'm like, oh, I can't lose this question. One of the things that troubles me with society today, Tara, and I had this conversation with my wife over the weekend, is we're quick to label everything and everybody. Oh, you have ADHD. Oh, you have ADD. Oh, you have this. Oh, you have that. And then it's like we get the label. We feel better about ourselves because we now have a label. And then once we have the label, we can provide the solution. And sometimes the solution is medication. So it's like, okay, label, diagnosis, solution, boom. Okay, you're good now. And I don't know if that's always the right approach or right thing. And when I hear that happen over and over and over and over and over and over and over, it just makes me more curious. And I love curiosity, because curiosity is the opposite of putting a label on. It's not accepting the label. It's actually asking the extra question.
Well, that's a really good point there, right? It's exactly that. You know, people are starting to identify imposter syndrome more. Oh, I can recognize it.
Yeah.
That's good. I have a label, so it's not this vague disturbance. You know, it's putting a framework around it. You can understand it better. But then if you don't do anything, you just say, oh, that's my imposter syndrome. Well, you're not changing it. You're not helping yourself. You're not getting past what is really unnecessary suffering, because the cause of imposter syndrome is this belief that our worth depends on what we do, and it's possible to change that with the right tools. So there is something we can do about it, but if you just stop at, well, that's the label of it, then it doesn't move forward.
So I want to try to make this relatable for the audience, and I don't want to make this about me. However, I would offer myself up and my journey through some of my experiences to make it relatable for the audience.
Please do.
If you feel that that is helpful for our conversation.
Yes, please do. Go ahead.
Because you talk about solutions to it, and you talk about the path of identifying it.
Yeah.
Let's have maybe a go back and forth. You know, what questions? So if I was sitting in your chair, you were my coach, my somebody who I had hired, and I'm saying, Tara, I don't, you know, what are some of the feelings that you can tell me that you believe I'm having? Let's maybe turn this around, because you've talked to a lot of people that have been in my shoes. How am I feeling right now, Tara?
How you're feeling? Well, that's a question for you to answer. I can tell you what the symptoms of imposter syndrome look like.
Yes, let's go there then. Yes. What are the symptoms that I have right now, which I'm sitting in your chair going, yeah, okay, you have imposter syndrome.
So the first thing is, everybody's got their own unique profile, right? So I'm going to list through a few things now, and some of them will be, oh yeah, I do that. And some of them will be like, oh no, that's not really me, but that's okay. That's just your profile. So there are 3 symptoms of imposter syndrome, 3 categories. First is the imposter syndrome thinking, the thoughts that I'm not good enough, I don't belong, what are people going to think of me? There's the self-doubt, different from self-reflection, right? We can go into that self-doubt, and there's that feeling that you're not, although you're good and successful, you're not quite good enough. And that's the imposter syndrome thinking. Often comes with a lot of self-criticism and self-judgment. What that does is that triggers your nervous system, actually. So that kind of thinking triggers your nervous system into fight, flight, and freeze, and you get this reaction, this stress response. So the second thing would be a stress response. You might feel yourself, if people know about the fight or flight symptoms, it's, you know, racing heart, it's muscle tension, you want to run away, you want to hit someone, makes you defensive or fearful, all of those things, or try and hide with freeze. It creates tension. It creates anxiety, a sense of overwhelm. It might disturb your sleep. So those are physiological symptoms that come from the way that you've been thinking. And then what people, particularly with imposter syndrome, try to do is they try and cope, right? This is the brain's in a stressed state, wants to do something about it. And there are certain behaviors characteristic of imposter syndrome that people do. They either try and hide, right? So they don't put themselves forward as much. They don't, try to stay out of the spotlight a little bit, or they try and, strive to be even better because they're not feeling quite good enough. So the hiding behaviors, things like keeping it a secret, comparing yourself to others, and you just see their outside success, their brilliance, and you see your self-doubt, and so you feel that you're not quite good enough. You might avoid opportunities. So for example, in your sphere, you'll say, oh, well, I couldn't possibly invite this person to come onto my show because they're too big for me, if you like. So that might be a kind of thing. You might decide that you haven't quite not got enough qualifications as well. So you might try, and since some people who take more and more courses. And then you've got the, and some people don't speak up enough. I know you love to talk, so this is your jam here, right? So that might not be you, but others, it's your unique profile. And then the striving behaviors are perfectionism. There's a certain kind of procrastination. There's a grit your teeth, push through, and hope that it'll go away, and it doesn't. And again, that feeling that you maybe need a few more qualifications when you really don't. Right? Those kind of things. So you've got these hiding and striving behaviors. Now, the problem with these is that they're not productive. Right? You're over preparing is a very classic one, actually. So you spend an awful lot of time, energy, effort, stress, doing things in a less productive way, and you know that it's not productive, and you've tried all these habit change things because we think that's a habit, but actually it's this symptom, a reaction, a coping behavior to the stress, and then we judge ourselves for it. Oh dear, I can't get rid of this procrastination habit, and then that feeds into the symptoms of the thinking, right? That judgment, self-criticism, I'm not good enough. So what you've got here is a cycle of these three categories, and people cycle around and around that. And so that's what you might pick out or recognize in any of those as imposter syndrome for you.
Absolutely. Thank you for defining those symptoms for me. I would say to you, Tara, that some of what I experienced as imposter syndrome was back in my old world of growing my previous company, where the world existed in the real world and virtual work wasn't really an accepted thing. And I have been a hybrid virtual work. It's what I love. It's what I believe in. And when I had to go on site to buildings, or I had to go into a corporate boardroom, holy shit, was I scared.
Yes.
Oh my God, the anxiety. Going to the airport, getting on the airplane, flying to Toronto or flying to a city, or having to go spend a weekend with, and believe me, I love human beings, but I'm also, you probably know this about me. I'm a big introvert. Like I am. Like I perhaps don't come across that way in this environment, but you put me in a room of 1,000 people, you're going to find me in the corner, anxious as, right? Wondering whether I should be there, whether I belong there. And people are like, no, but Keith, you do. Well, so I've struggled with that, right? So back in the old world, which was, okay, we all got to go be in a physical space together. Oh my God, did that ever cause anxiety for me?
Right.
When the pandemic happened, did you imagine how good I felt?
Yeah.
Because I was running this virtual company, Tara, and I'm like, hey, I know how to do this. I'm really good at this. So all of a sudden, the script was flipped.
Yes.
I had all these people that didn't know how to work virtually and had their imposter syndrome getting in front of the camera.
Yeah.
People are like, hey, Keith, you're good at this thing in front of the show. Yeah, I've been doing it for 15 years because I had to get people to drink my Kool-Aid by doing this, by talking to you. I had to convince you to either buy from me or to whatever it was. But when the pandemic happened, Tara, all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm a good leader because this is what I'm good at. To all of you that don't know how to do this, I'm sorry that you're not feeling what I was feeling. Yeah. I will tell you right now, I've never spoken about this with anybody before. I've never talked about this publicly. I But that's a true case. And then I experienced it again when I came back into the world about, okay, so I'm now not the ICUC guy anymore. I'm not the social media guy anymore. So now what the hell am I?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I know I'm a great dad. I know I'm a divorced dad. I got this baggage in my world, but what the hell am I? And I know there's a lot of people that are relating to me right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So then, Tara, is again, I share with you as my coach. And again, audience, I'm just speaking freely from my heart because I think you can relate. I was looking forward to today's show because I was going to look at this as much of a therapy session for myself. But Tara, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this thing behind the microphone and the camera and started having great guests, started having great conversations. And it was like a couple weeks ago, somebody said to me, what? You're really good at this. Like, why don't you kind of make this even bigger than it? Make this bigger than it actually. Like, let's go all in. I'm like, yeah, let's go all in.
Yes.
Right. And over time, my imposter syndrome doing this. If you watch the shows from show one, and I had this conversation with my father-in-law last night.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people listening right now, and I'm glad you said it earlier. There's a lot of people listening right now that are afraid or can't get started. Well, I had that same feeling. I'm 683 videos in. Could you imagine if I was still having that feeling?
Yeah. You know what's interesting is that some people are still having that.
I know.
So Meryl Streep has won more acting awards than anyone on the planet, right? She's this superstar. She has imposter syndrome. And before she starts filming a new movie, she has this sense of, why would anyone want to come and watch me? And the rest of the world is going, because you're awesome. But she's not. So a lot of people hope that practice is the solution. It's one of these social media or magazine solutions to imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And it actually doesn't help. It actually doesn't help. It's easy. It can make things easier, but it doesn't get rid of imposter syndrome completely for everyone.
I'm glad you raised Meryl Streep. Great actress. But I'm wondering with that example, if because she speaks to it and admits to it, it makes her even more human, which makes her even more relatable, which makes her even a better actor, which makes us all more want to drink her Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And this is why I am thrilled that imposter syndrome is becoming more and more recognized and more seen as, this is a thing. Because one of the big problems of imposter syndrome is people keep it a secret. Like you said earlier, I haven't told anyone this, right?
Yeah.
People think that it's just them. They look around, this is the comparing part. They look around at everyone else, and everyone else they look so successful and so on it and so cool and so collected. And they don't see this internal feeling that we have that's all disturbed, this stress, they don't seem to have. Well, it's fact that we don't look like it either. So even though your show one is different, you would have come across to many people on show one as this supremely capable and competent and great interviewer and great host. So it's kind of a disconnect from what's really going on. And this is why some people say that imposter, I know you asked right at the very start, you had a great set of questions right at the very start.
No.
Is imposter syndrome a thing? Is it real, or is it just, the human condition? Right. And so the research into imposter syndrome is like, yes, it is a thing. But the reason why people don't think it's a thing is because it's in the range of normal functioning. So if you go to a therapist, for example, and they take people from abnormal or dysfunction and they bring them up to normal functioning, right? So you can get dressed, you can be successful, you can go out into the world. And that's the realm of imposter syndrome. So it doesn't show up in the DSM-5, which is the manual that therapists use, and they look up what these different syndromes are. It's not even a medical syndrome. It was originally called imposter phenomenon. There's probably too many. It's too hard to say. It's too many syllables in it.
Yes.
And became casually known as imposter syndrome, but it's not a real syndrome. And this is why some people say it doesn't exist. Well, it's not a real syndrome, but it's still there. It's still a thing. So it doesn't need medication. It doesn't need therapy in the classical sense of therapy. But it's very much a pattern that affects over 70% of high achievers, which is a huge number.
I noticed that. So before we came into the show, I looked at that stat, 70% of high achievers. And I noticed that it was 70% of high achievers, not 70% of population, 70% of high achievers. So right off the bat, you've taken right off the bat, rhetorically, we've taken a group of people that already have attributes about them, which put them either, I guess, at risk or at awareness of having this kind of syndrome.
Yeah, well, we come back to, so that's actually another thing. People think that there's a lot of the research over the last 40 years has been trying to identify which personality traits.
Okay.
Who is it that we can, and I'm sure this is the thinking behind it, filter out in our hiring so we don't hire people with imposter syndrome. Yeah, I'm sure it's that, right? But what they came up with is it doesn't have any relation to personality traits. So you can be an extreme, it's on the extroversion, introversion. It's not on that scale at all. On the motivation, not that at all. What it is, though, is if we come back to that, who we are is what we do. When people are high achievers, when they're successful, then they put a lot of their self-worth into their job, their work, and their role in the world. And as they get more successful, that gap between how successful they are and how successful they're feeling is more obvious. So, yeah.
Okay, so rewind that again. So I'm listening. I'm taking this in. So the gap between how successful they are and how successful they're feeling becomes larger.
Yes, because they've just, for example, you might win an award. I think, who am I to do this? How did I get here? And there isn't always the pleasant surprise when you've achieved things, but it's a feeling like you don't actually deserve it. So all around you, you've got people saying, "Hey, you're great. You're fantastic," and they don't understand that you're not feeling it. You're not really owning your achievements, and that just stands out more when you get to higher levels of achievement.
Could humility or being overly humble be what's the word I'm looking for? Could it be a mask for somebody's imposter syndrome where, they're getting on stage, accepting that word, being extremely humble, really trying to sell their humility to the audience, but then they get backstage and they either A, they know they're the shit, or B, they really don't know they're the shit. But just that message that they're trying to convey is their way of masking who they really are.
So with imposter syndrome, that's actually one of the symptoms I forgot to mention. I thought I'd forgotten one. So one of them is deflecting praise. Somebody says, "Oh, you did great. Oh, I just had a good team. Oh, I just got lucky. Oh, it was good timing." And that all sounds like humility, right? That all sounds like someone's being humble. But the imposter syndrome is genuinely not feeling that you deserve that praise, trying to almost avoid that praise, because you then feel that, sometimes people feel that if I accepted that praise and I'm not feeling good enough, people are going to ask even more of me. And when they ask even more of me, then at some point it's all going to fall apart. So there's this sense that at any point someone's going to catch you out and turn around and say, "Hey, we shouldn't have hired you. What were we thinking? I'm sorry you have to go." That's the stress that's part of imposter syndrome. So yeah, the deflecting praise is for people who are saying they're pretending to be humble, and inside they're feeling fantastic, right? That could be a genuine mask, people trying to be more likable. It's nothing more, but it's not really related to imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is when you don't want the praise, you try and avoid the praise because you think that, well, actually, logically, you know that you've earned it, but internally you don't, and it's you don't feel it, right? And that's it. So what's happening in your brain? It's called a cognitive dissonance, right?
Yes,
It's where you're
yes.
trying to believe two opposing things at the same time, and it's very stressful for the brain.
So then let me ask you this again, perhaps maybe using my own experience to keep this relatable. It's this idea of leaning into something. Okay. So I've recognized maybe we're pretty good at doing this. Okay. So we're going to get some attention doing this. But what I really love to do is shine the light on everybody else. So we go up the mountain together while the light's being shined over here on the guy who's leading the pack. But really what I want to do is not deflect it. I want to lean into it all with my mirror and shine the light on everybody else. Does that make sense to you? Is that a way of me embracing my own issues with identity, imposter syndrome, and all of that? I'm not trying to deflect it. I'm actually, Tara, I'm leaning into it because I'm recognizing that these feelings and this awareness that I have. So instead, I'm going to lean into it and embrace it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Yes, I would say that impulse comes from your values, right? You know, one of the values that you've shown there is that you want to be of service to others. You want to help
Yes.
and uplift others.
Yes.
That is very important to you. So this is a vehicle for it, and because that's a strong value for you, you will put up with the discomfort. Right, the leaning in, you will put up with the discomfort in order to achieve this goal. So that's actually something genuine coming from you. That doesn't sound like imposter syndrome.
Interesting. So, okay, that's good. That's good then.
Right.
You talked originally about a book coming out and solutions for imposter syndrome. And I guess I brought up leaning into it because it was my way of addressing perhaps how I thought I was manage my own issues. My own issues with all this was by leaning into some of my emotions. So let me rephrase a question for you. What are some of the solutions that somebody could participate in or inherently use to manage their own imposter syndrome besides calling Tara Halliday?
Yeah, well, you've got two things you can do. One is you can manage the symptoms.
Okay.
Right? And so you can the fastest way to manage the thinking is to change the comparing part of it. Right?
Yes.
So when we're comparing ourselves with others, there's often a big trigger for imposter syndrome. Comparing ourselves with others, we're looking for the differences. And in fact, the brain is designed to look for differences because it's looking out for physical danger. It's part of its survival mechanism.
Yes.
So it's always on the lookout. So you'll notice the difference and then you'll judge yourself and feel bad about it. So some people say stop comparing. You can't because your brain's always going to be looking out for danger. But when you notice that you're comparing, you can flip it around. If you start to look for similarities and make a list of how you are the same or have had similar experiences or the commonalities, the more of those you can list out, the more like that person you will feel. So you'll feel more of a sense of belonging, less isolation. So that's like, it doesn't solve all of the imposter syndrome thinking, but it can certainly help with the physiological stress. Getting yourself calm as quickly as you can, doing things, routine maintenance things. I mean, people talk about sleep, hydration, diet, and exercise. All those good high performance things are all good to help calm the nervous system, and that means you'll be less likely to do you have less of an impulse to do the behaviors. And then with the behaviors, we think they're habits, recognize that, don't beat yourself up, right? Recognize that this is a coping behavior because of that stress, because of the thinking, because of, these symptoms going round and round. So that's how you can manage the symptoms. And that's in both of my books is how to do that. Getting rid of imposter syndrome means changing that underlying belief that your worth and what you do are the same, and that your worth is conditional. And so there's a certain process that uses an awful lot of brain science to separate out your worth from what you do, so that your worth becomes steady. It frees you, because then if you succeed at something or fail at something, your worth still stays the same. So it means that you're more likely to be more adventurous. You take on bigger things with less of that fear of failure or fear of success. It makes you more, because you're calmer, because your nervous system isn't being triggered all the time. It changes the way you interact with people. You're more compassionate with people. You're more compassionate with yourself. So it increases your energy. So that's what happens when you get rid of it. So the opposite of imposter syndrome, or the cure for imposter syndrome, if you like, is getting to that deep self-acceptance, where you're not judging yourself, you're not criticizing yourself. And that's the exciting bit. That's what I'm writing this paper about.
Wow. That's yeah. I had goosebumps there. I think I had some emotion coming out of my eyes a little bit to anybody watching, because I'm just taking all that in, because I love hearing the science of it, and I love hearing of how we as humans, how you're teaching us to deal with it, how you're teaching me as a human. Like, I was hanging on every word you were saying, because I wanted to understand how I can use that in my life, and how I have had to use it in my life.
Yes. So the science goes quite deep. We can go quite deep into it. I don't know how deep you want to go right now, or we can talk about something else. Up to you.
No, let's go. Let's go.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So the belief that your worth is conditional belief is that one of these weird words, because it's so vague.
Yes.
Right? You can think that, one belief is your opinions, like your hockey team is the best in the world, right? Yeah, exactly right.
Thank you. You were paying attention at the beginning. Thank you.
Your thought. We often think of beliefs as your thoughts about something. So
Yes.
You really believe that the stock market is going to go up next year, and this is a good time to invest. All those kind of thoughts. Then there's another kind of belief that are kind of like the brain's shortcuts, right? So operating the brain is very expensive in terms of energy, and so the brain tries to put everything as much on automatic as possible. So if you've got, if you realize, for example, that people, when they drive to work, they get there and they don't remember anything of the journey. Right? That's their brain being on automatic and still looking out for things. So that's another kind of beliefs. For example, if you were crossing the road, we don't have to test with your foot to know that the road is going to hold you up at every step. So we can just stroll across and get on with things. That's efficiency. And then there's a third kind of belief. And this is where your brain, in fact, your amygdala, two parts of the brain, the fear center of the brain, it kind of has a list of dangers, and it's checking off what things are dangerous for you. It's a very primal survival mechanism, right? And the way that the brain learns what is a danger is quite a complicated neurochemical process. So there's a chemical that's released under certain conditions, like when you're surprised, when something's really important to you, or when you have strong emotion, which is usually a fear, right, a shock. And what happens then is that in any of those three situations, your amygdala goes, oh, this is this is a danger situation. I need to learn this. And it stores the combination of the emotion and the memory. and then it adds it to the checklist of things that are dangerous. So this is why, for example, oh gosh, I've got to say, last year I found an enormous spider, huge, on my bath towel as I was getting out of the shower. Like, huge, enormous spider. It freaked me out. Okay, and I think I am still a year later shaking out my towel just in case.
Because
Like that,
because your brain put it on the list.
because the brain put it on the list. Exactly. Right. One of the things that's on that list is that your worth depends on what you do. Right.
And if I can offer this,
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to suspect society says if you're a man, your worth is something. It just I'm not trying to genderize this, but society has labels all of us, and
Yes.
you know what I'm trying to say here, without offending anybody. But I'm thinking that men are like, oh yeah, well, society says I'm this. What the hell am I actually?
Yes. I think that that comes under the label, if we're going to give it another label of, toxic masculinity. It's an unhelpful label. Men are not less allowed to express themselves. And what's interesting is that a lot of these social media posts about imposter syndrome say that women get it more than men. Well, actually, it's exactly the same.
I'm leaning into this because you've used the word a number of times, which again, I'm going to just relate to it. Self-worth.
Yes.
And we / society often, hate to say it, but I'm going to say it, link self-worth to women. I'm telling you, men have just as many problems with self-worth as women do. So stop, everybody, just stop strapping it on. Nope, she's a female, she has self-worth problems. Actually, no, I've had them myself.
Yes. And it serves no one, because it makes women feel bad about being a woman. That maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with them. And when men have it, they feel even worse, because this is a woman's thing, and they feel like less likely to even want to connect with it.
So I'm glad you're leaning into those two words and you're making them friendly for my male audience, for my female audience, but most importantly for my male audience, because gentlemen, I know you're struggling sometimes with your self-worth.
Yeah.
I know you are. And don't just look at the females out there, because we're all the same.
Yes. And there's again, we're getting to, like, there's vague terms that people use.
Yes.
So self-worth and self-esteem are often
interconnected,
considered to be the same
when they're not.
Right. And they're not.
Yes.
Imposter syndrome is not low self-esteem, because it's affecting high achievers. It's affecting people at their top of their field. If they had low self-esteem, that would affect their lives in every way, and they would never have had the internal courage, internal confidence, if you like, to have gone out and done what they've done. So it's a difference. So I like to make it either conditional worth or unconditional worth.
And I love that you've weaved the word unconditional. I don't think it's a word that we use enough in society.
Yeah.
And then when we're going to use it, intentionally support the word. It's one thing to use the word, but then not. And then I love the word intentional, because when you use that word, Tara, you really got to stand behind it, or else again, don't use it. Again, another word often not used in society. So imagine, being intentionally unconditional.
Yes. So if we bring it right back to the changing the amygdala, and that, so the conditional worth is on the list that the amygdala has of dangers. Right now, it doesn't have. When it was originally identified back in the 1950s, right, by one of the granddaddies of personal psychology, Carl Rogers, 1950s, he identified the root cause of human suffering is this conditional worth. It's fascinating. So he's talking about it. He's not even talking about imposter syndrome. We didn't even know that was on the radar. He says that's everywhere, across everywhere, and that is really why people are suffering. But the problem is, it's an unconscious thing. So it's on the list in the amygdala, but we don't know it's there. So often if I talk about conditional and unconditional worth, people are like, yeah, I don't really see it in my life. They'll see the symptoms of imposter syndrome. This is why I went into it. It's easier to find, if you like, with the symptoms, but they won't recognize it. So to get rid of that belief, to change the belief, we have to do some very, very specific ways of unlocking this belief in the brain. So so this belief, this conditional worth belief, is if it's sitting there at in the amygdala, and then we have all sorts of life experiences that pile on top of it that seem to confirm that that our worth is conditional. So we've got this series of confirming events that we've built up throughout our lives, and so that is up to the brain a lot of proof that this belief is true.
Yes.
Right? Because it's got all of this confirming experience. So what we do to change this belief is we release some of these previous proofs and let them go and change the way. And we do this if we kind of rewrite the emotion memory stored in the amygdala using neurochemicals. It's very exciting.
So in your case, using the spider, it's you consciously having that awareness of when you go into your bathroom and recognize that this towel does not have a spider in it, and doing it over and over and teaching your brain that you're being illogical, that there's not a spider in there. Is that what you're saying in many ways, that you're having to reteach your thought process that there's no logic in what you're actually thinking? Am I correct?
Yes, you are. Now, I probably didn't use a good example with the spider because that's a, reaction to an actual
Sure. Yes.
Interpreted as danger. Is not conditional worth. So let me use another example of how we get locked in with labels and proofs.
Yes.
When I was 11, I got asked to sing at a carol service, and they gave me this solo spot singing Silent Night, which is a very, very high, and I couldn't quite reach the high notes. I was a bit squeaky, and nobody ever asked me to sing anywhere ever again. Not surprising because it wasn't very good, right? I assumed that I wasn't a very good singer, right? Because I can't reach the notes, right? So I can't be a good singer. So throughout my life, I love singing. Karaoke, I love it. Singing in the shower, in the car, I'm all there. But I've never thought of myself, the label, as having a good voice. And so I've never trained it. I've never studied it because what's the point? I'm not very good at it. Last year, I joined a choir. And what we discovered was that actually I'm not a soprano, I'm an alto, which is the lower notes. So I can go quite low with I sing, but I can't reach the soprano highs. And so I've had a lifetime of my belief of not being a very good singer down to that one incident, right? So if we can go back in time and rewrite that incident and say, okay, somebody just didn't recognize that you're an alto and gave you the wrong song. If they'd given you a different song, you would have sung it beautifully. You can see how that would have just changed my life. So that incident was one incident that proved to me that I wasn't a good singer. So if we go back and rewrite it with new evidence, which is part of it, but also new emotion. So because it was very hurtful to think that I was embarrassing and I felt bad about it. I think we can actually deliberately go back and change the emotion that's related to that memory. That actually changes in the amygdala and it takes it off the list. So what we do is we take off a number of these small events. This isn't trauma therapy, right? Imposter syndrome is not about trauma, but these small events that have proved to us in the past that our worth is conditional. And that allows us then to easily get to the deep self-acceptance that cures imposter syndrome.
What an exceptional example, and what a vulnerable way to share yourself as we wrap up today's conversation. Thank you
My pleasure.
What a great chat.
It's been good. Yes.
It's been remarkable. I know we dived right into the deep end right off the beginning, but I suspect the audience got as much out of this conversation as I did, and I'm full of gratitude for that. Thank you. I'm going to leave here today. I'm actually going to go for a walk after our chat here, and I'm going to go for a walk and take everything you shared with me, create that awareness in my head, and remind myself of my self-worth.
Remind yourself of your unconditional worth, that
Thank
it doesn't depend on what you do.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Now, I've developed this one way that's going into brain engineering, right? If you like, of changing that. And I think if other people explore it, there may be other ways to develop unconditional worth. So I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. But if we have it as a question, how can I deeply accept myself? And not just tell yourself in the mirror, because your brain won't believe it. If you say, I deeply accept myself, your brain, your amygdala is saying, oh no, it's on the list. It's not going to work. But yeah, the journey, if you like, is develop that deep self-acceptance, unconditional worth, and that creates a profound change in your life.
Wow. I as you're speaking, and I again thought about this halfway through our conversation, and I don't want to forget to bring it up. There's much discussion these days on the socials, on LinkedIn, amongst society around the idea, the concept, this perhaps need of having a personal brand, especially in a world of AI humans, what's real, what's fake, what's the value of a resume anymore when ChatGPT can create one in seconds. I would believe, Tara, that having a personal brand is only going to either, I hate to say it, either accentuate more people's challenges with imposter syndrome, or it's going to create more awareness to go look in the mirror and have that unconditional unconditional worth for yourself, right? Because if you really want to have a personal brand, you really have to be comfortable looking in the mirror and accepting who you actually are, not to pretend who you think you are.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to acknowledge that that's hard work, because it is on your amygdala's list, right? You have to find out your brain is going to believe its own model before it believes something new. Right. So this is why people say, well, it keeps coming back. Imposter syndrome keeps coming back again and again.
It's what holds people back.
Exactly. It holds people back. It drags them down. It leads to burnout. People quit careers, all because of imposter syndrome, and completely unnecessary suffering, which is what moves me to help people, because there's no reason people should have it. We've got these brilliant, talented, successful people who are being put through this unnecessary stress and not getting the most out of their lives, not feeling like they've made the biggest and best contribution, not feeling the most satisfaction with their work. And the ripple effect it has on relationships. Oh, it just goes on and on.
Tara Halliday, thanks for enlightening my life over the last 63 minutes, as well as a Business Athlete Nation's lives with your thoughtful words, with everything you've taught us, both in the science side of things, your experience. I'm really grateful for your appearance today. Tara, how can people find you? How can they get a hold of you? Was there anything we did not speak about today that you want to make sure the audience is aware of, whether it's a book, whether it's something that, Keith, we haven't talked about this, or Keith, the audience needs to know this?
Yeah, so I think for an audience on LinkedIn, you might come and look at my profile, Tara-Halliday-PhD, and I've got everything about it. What is on there is a quiz, and actually on YouTube as well. Outsmart Imposter Syndrome is my channel, and there is a quiz that you can take, 20-question quiz, and it'll tell you how significant imposter syndrome is in your life, how much of a disturbance it's causing you. So that question of, oh, I have imposter syndrome, or do I have imposter syndrome? That's a good start. And then the other part is check out my book, Outsmart Imposter Syndrome. I go into the whole process of how to get rid of it. I wrote it as an open source, open information book, so I'm not holding back any secrets in there. It's all out there, so anyone else can pick it up. They can go through it themselves. It's always best with these things to have someone to go through it with.
Yes.
But you can do it yourself, and I've had some readers who've had some great experiences like that. Or you can give it to a therapist that you like, or a coach that you like, and they can help you through it. So there's lots of ways that people can get the help that they deserve. Imposter syndrome, it feels like you don't deserve it, but you really, really do.
Tara, there might be some, I like to make recommendations and suggestions and let the audience make decisions. There might be a great discussion to be had with a round table with a number of Tara Hallidays and peers of yours around this specific topic, imposter syndrome, and battling it and dealing with it and the symptoms and the solutions. Would you be interested in joining me for that conversation if I can set that up?
Yes, I'd be delighted. I'd be delighted if the round table was, how do we develop unconditional worth? Because I think that's the heart of it. Because people get caught up in the symptoms.
Yes.
And as I said right at the start, there haven't been other validated proofs of ways to get rid of imposter syndrome.
Then I'll offer this. I've never offered this to a guest before, and I'm going to offer it to you. If that is a conversation that you would love to lead, I am more than happy to have a platform, assist you with getting other hosts, finding a mutual time. Love to do it live like we're doing it today, but I would love to provide the platform, have that conversation. My ambition here is to create the world's biggest talk show on LinkedIn and YouTube, have a global conversation, be the conduit of conversation, maybe throw questions out and step back and deflect, Tara. But ultimately, if it's something that you would love to shepherd alongside of me, and I'm not saying do it yourself, but I'm saying if that's something you want to lead and you believe in, I would be honored and flattered to give you the platform to be a part of that with you. I would love to have that conversation.
That sounds amazing. I had never thought of doing that, and I think that's an absolutely brilliant idea.
Let's find some time over the next couple of weeks or months or so and find a time on the calendar. We'll get some guests. We'll book whatever, 60, 90 minutes, 120 minutes. We'll have a big global discussion.
Yes.
Right around that exact topic.
Nice.
I
Yes.
would love that. Awesome.
I would love that too. Brilliant. Yes.
Hey, it was your idea. I'm just deflecting back to you, kid.
Now, can I say what you're doing again? This is your values and things. This isn't deflecting. What you're doing is people talk about holding space.
Yes.
You're creating a space. You're creating a space to allow this to happen. And there is an awful lot of value in that.
Yes.
That action.
Oh, that's spectacular. Tara,
I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. I know Nation loves when Keith fanboys over his guests, and I'm suspecting they're going to be going, oh, Billis is fanboying over Tara Halliday again. I am big time. Every now and then I have to throw this out on the air like you're my favorite guest. You might be my favorite guest this week. And it's only Monday. So today. Yeah, I had one this morning, but no, my favorite guest from Wales. I haven't had any before, but
okay. I'll take that one. Let's go for it.
There you go. Tara, you've been awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you to hang tight in the green room. I'm going to say goodbye to my audience, and I'm going to come back and politely walk you out, okay?
All right, lovely. So good to be here. What a great chat. Thank you very much, Keith.
Thank you so much. Hang tight. All right, so you heard it with Tara. You heard it with myself. We had a vulnerable, honest conversation, and I see a number of you are still hanging around, and I'm really grateful for that. I have something for you to think about as you wrap up maybe our chat today. Maybe you're falling asleep with me. Maybe you're starting your day. Maybe you're out for a walk. Whatever you're doing, unconditional worth. Don't link it to anything. Try to make it unconditional. Just try. Maybe that's the suggestion I leave with you for today. Maybe you don't rush to the end and say, okay, I'm unconditionally believing in myself. Maybe that's too much to ask right now today. I've been there. Trust me. Step by step. Poly. It'll happen. All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow mornings in the lab. Myself, Nicole Bernard. We always bring it Monday to Friday, a place to start your day. Tara, it's the time to end your day if you want to come join us in the mornings. It's actually lunchtime for you. No, you can join us at lunchtime. So we go 8 o'clock Eastern time, Monday to Friday. Mornings in the lab with Keith and Nicole. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Probably some guests. I haven't checked the schedule yet. And then tomorrow, same time, live in the lab. I'm looking at my calendar for tomorrow. We have Joseph Malone. Interesting fellow. I invite you to check out Joseph Malone on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and come join the conversation tomorrow. Noon Central, 1 o'clock Eastern, here in the lab. I'm Keith Billis. You know what? I'm getting out of here. Chivalry is not dead. I'm going to go walk Tara out of the lab. See you guys.